When I went to my vacation home, I noticed the wallpaper had been changed. I found it strange because the place had been closed for a year. So I checked the security cameras I had secretly installed. When I saw the footage, I froze at what I saw. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The drive to the lake house always calmed my nerves. 70 miles of winding country roads through Vermont's autumn landscape, trees ablaze with orange and gold, the air crisp enough to remind me I was still alive at 63. I'd made this journey dozens of times over the past 15 years, ever since Harold and I bought the place as our retirement dream. Now, 2 years after his funeral, I made it alone. I pulled into the gravel driveway, noting the lawn had been mowed recently. That was odd. I'd canceled the landscaping service 6 months ago when money got tight. My daughter Ruby knew I was coming. I'd mentioned it during our brief, uncomfortable phone call last week, but she hadn't said anything about maintaining the property. The key turned smoothly in the lock. Too smoothly. I'd expected the usual resistance, that sticky feeling of a door unopened for months. Inside, the air smelled fresh, not musty. No dust coated the entry table where I always left my sunglasses. My heart began a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it last October. The blue sofa faced the stone fireplace. Harold's favorite chair sat in the corner, the reading lamp beside it. The landscape paintings we'd collected over the years hung in their proper places. But something felt wrong, like walking into a room seconds after someone has left it. I moved through the living room, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. That's when I noticed it. The wallpaper. I stopped mid-step, my breath catching. The pattern was the same. That delicate floral design Harold had chosen. Pale roses climbing up cream-colored vines. But this wasn't the same paper. The colors were brighter, more vivid. The roses practically glowed with freshness. The original had been faded, yellowed by 15 years of afternoon sun streaming through the western windows. Someone had replaced it. Recently. My hands trembled as I touched the wall. The paper was smooth, perfectly hung, without a single bubble or crease. Professional work? Expensive work? But why? And who? I pulled out my phone and called Ruby. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Ruby, it's Mom. I'm at the lake house and—" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "I need to talk to you. Call me back." The house suddenly felt too quiet, too watchful. I walked to the kitchen, checking for other changes. The refrigerator hummed softly, plugged in and running. I'd unplugged it last year. Inside, I found bottled water, some condiments, a block of cheese, fresh food. Someone had been here. Someone had been living here. The realization hit me like cold water. Ruby and her husband Philip. They must have been using the house. But why keep it secret? Why replace the wallpaper? I thought about calling her again, then stopped. Something in my gut told me to wait, to look around first. Ruby had been distant lately, ever since Philip lost his job at the accounting firm 8 months ago. They'd been struggling financially. She'd mentioned it once, quickly, before changing the subject. I'd offered to help, but she'd refused with that proud, stubborn tone that reminded me so much of myself at her age. Had they been staying here? Using it as a getaway? That wouldn't bother me. What bothered me was the secrecy and the wallpaper. Who replaces wallpaper in a house they don't own? A house they're supposedly using without permission? I climbed the stairs to the second floor, my hand gripping the railing. 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, all looking untouched. But in the master bedroom, I noticed the bed was made with different sheets, cream-colored instead of the blue floral set I'd left. The closet held some clothes I didn't recognize. Women's business attire, size 6. Ruby's size. Then I remembered. The security cameras. Harold had installed them 3 years ago after we'd had a break-in. Teenagers, as it turned out, looking for liquor and electronics. He'd hidden them carefully. One in the living room disguised as a smoke detector, another in the kitchen as a wall clock, a third in the upstairs hallway as a picture frame. Ruby didn't know about them. Harold had been paranoid about advertising home security systems, said it just told criminals what to work around. The footage uploaded to a cloud service, accessible from my phone. I'd forgotten all about it until this moment. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the app. My fingers felt thick and clumsy as I scrolled through the calendar, going back 3 months. August 15th. I selected the living room camera and pressed play. The screen showed the empty room in the harsh light of afternoon. Nothing. I fast-forwarded. At 6:47 p.m., the front door opened. Ruby entered, but not the Ruby I knew. This woman moved with frantic energy, her hair pulled back, her face pale and tight with stress. Philip followed, carrying something heavy wrapped in a tarp. My son-in-law looked terrible, gaunt, unshaven, his eyes darting around like a cornered animal. I watched them cross the living room. Ruby pointed to the wall, the one with the fresh wallpaper. Philip nodded. He set down the bundle. It looked about 4 feet long, cylindrical, and began examining the wall, running his hands over it, tapping, listening. My heart hammered. What were they doing? Philip pulled out a knife, no, a utility blade, and made a careful incision in the wallpaper. He peeled back a section, revealing the white plaster beneath. Then he did something that made my blood run cold. He began cutting a larger hole in the wall. I watched in horror as he removed chunks of plaster, carefully, methodically, creating an opening about 2 feet square. Ruby stood guard at the window, peering through the curtains every few seconds. The tension in her posture was unmistakable. They were terrified of being caught. When the hole was large enough, Philip picked up the tarp-wrapped bundle. He lifted it, struggling with the weight, and began pushing it into the wall cavity. It took several minutes of maneuvering, but eventually it disappeared completely into the space between the wall studs. I pressed pause, my hand over my mouth. My daughter and her husband had hidden something in my wall, something they didn't want found, something heavy enough to require both of them to transport it. The video continued. Philip patched the hole with remarkable skill. He must have brought supplies, smoothing plaster, sanding, preparing the surface. Then, over the next 3 days according to the timestamps, they replaced the entire wall's wallpaper. Not just the damaged section, but the whole wall, ensuring the repair would be invisible. I scrolled forward, watching them return twice more over the following weeks, always checking the wall, pressing their ears against it, making sure everything remained hidden. The most recent visit was 5 days ago. Ruby had stood alone in front of the wall, her hand pressed against it, her shoulders shaking. She was crying. I closed the video, my mind racing. What had they hidden? Why here? And why had Ruby been crying? The obvious answer made me sick. Something illegal. Stolen goods. Evidence. But my daughter wasn't a criminal. Ruby was a middle school teacher, for heaven's sake. She volunteered at animal shelters. She'd never even gotten a speeding ticket. But Philip, I knew less about Philip. He'd always been charming but evasive, never quite looking me in the eye, always with a ready excuse for why they couldn't visit, why they needed to leave early. Ruby had met him 4 years ago at some education conference. They'd married quickly, perhaps too quickly. I stood and walked to the wall in question. The fresh wallpaper stared back at me, innocent and perfect. Behind it, hidden in the dark cavity between studs, something waited. Something that had made my daughter cry. Something that had transformed my son-in-law into a frightened, desperate man. I pressed my ear against the wall, listening. Nothing. Just the silence of concealment. My phone buzzed. Ruby calling back. "Mom! Sorry, I was in a meeting. What's up?" Her voice sounded normal, cheerful even. The performance was flawless. "I'm at the lake house," I said carefully. "I noticed someone's been maintaining it. Thank you for that." A pause. "Oh, yeah. Philip and I have been checking on it occasionally. You know, making sure everything's okay. The wallpaper looks fresh." Another pause. Longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, become guarded. "What do you mean?" "In the living room. It's been replaced." "Mom, I think you're remembering wrong. That paper's been there for years." "Ruby." I kept my voice level, calm. "I know it's new. I know you've been here. I need to know why." Silence stretched between us, taut as a wire. Then she spoke, and the fear in her voice was unmistakable. "Mom, please, don't ask questions. Don't look. Don't—" She stopped, and I heard a man's voice in the background. Philip, I have to go. Please, just forget you noticed anything. Please. She hung up. I stood alone in my lake house, staring at the wall that held secrets, my phone warm in my hand. My daughter was in trouble. My daughter, who I'd raised to be honest and brave, was now lying to me and begging me not to investigate. Every instinct told me to call the police, but something stronger stopped me. Maternal instinct, perhaps, or the memory of Ruby as a little girl, how she'd always come to me when she was scared, how she'd trusted me to protect her. I walked back downstairs and found my purse. From the bottom compartment, I pulled out the small crowbar Harold had insisted I keep in my car. You never know when you might need to pry something open, he'd said. I stood before the wall, crowbar in hand, heart pounding. Whatever was behind that wallpaper, whatever had driven my daughter to this desperate secrecy, I was about to discover. And then I would decide, protect her or expose her. I raised the crowbar and pressed it against the seam where the wallpaper met the molding. The fresh adhesive gave way easily. I pulled back a corner, then another, revealing the patched plaster underneath. One strike with the crowbar, and the plaster cracked open like an eggshell. I reached into the darkness of the wall cavity and felt something cold, smooth, plastic wrapping. I pulled, and the bundle began to emerge, heavy and unwieldy. It took all my strength to drag it out and lay it on the floor. My hands shook as I unwrapped the tarp, then the plastic sheeting underneath. The object inside was long, metallic, sealed in more layers of protection. When I finally revealed what my daughter had hidden in my wall, I screamed. It wasn't what I'd expected. It was so much worse. And the worst part? I understood immediately why they'd done it, and why Ruby had been crying. Because what I held in my hands would either save them or destroy us all. The metal cylinder was a time capsule of sorts, but not the innocent kind children bury in backyards. Inside the waterproof container, I found a tablet computer sealed in plastic, a stack of documents, USB drives, and a handwritten note in Philip's messy scrawl. Insurance. Do not destroy. Lives depend on this. I sat on the floor, surrounded by the scattered contents, my mind racing. The tablet powered on when I pressed the button, its battery somehow still holding a charge. The home screen showed a single folder labeled Dixon Development LLC. My blood went cold. I knew that name. Everyone in Vermont knew Dixon Development. They'd been in the news constantly over the past year. Something about fraud, environmental violations, bribes to state officials. The owner, Earl Dixon, had held a press conference 6 months ago denying everything. His lawyers arranged behind him like a wall of expensive suits. And Philip had worked as an accountant for a firm that did consulting work for Dixon. I remembered Ruby mentioning it once, saying how Philip hated the client, but the billable hours were good. I opened the folder. Spreadsheets, hundreds of them, emails, scanned documents with official letterheads, photos of checks, bank statements, notarized agreements, all meticulously organized, dated, cross-referenced. This wasn't just evidence. This was a prosecutorial roadmap. My phone rang, startling me so badly I nearly dropped it. Ruby again. Mom, where are you? Her voice was tight, panicked. Are you still at the house? Yes. Did you... She stopped, breathing hard. Did you find it? I found it. A sound escaped her, half sob, half laugh. Oh, God. Mom, you have to put it back. Right now. Seal it up, fix the wall, and forget you ever saw it. Ruby, this is evidence of crimes. Major crimes. Dixon Development. I know what it is, she shouted, then lowered her voice to a harsh whisper. I know exactly what it is. That's why you need to hide it again. They're looking for it, Mom. They know Philip took it. They just don't know where he put it. Who's looking? Dixon's people. Maybe worse. She was crying now. Philip witnessed things. He documented everything because he thought he was protecting himself, building a case to go to the authorities. But then his supervisor died. Car accident, they said. And Philip's apartment was broken into twice in 1 month. Nothing stolen, just searched. That's when he knew he couldn't keep it with us. That's when he thought of the lake house. I looked at the pile of evidence on my floor. Ruby, if this proves criminal activity, You need to go to the police, the FBI, the Attorney General's office. We tried. Her voice broke. We went to a lawyer, a good one. He looked at everything and told us to be very, very careful. Said people with Dixon's money and connections don't go down easy. Said we needed more than documents. We needed protection, immunity deals, witness protection maybe. He was working on finding the right prosecutor to approach when… She stopped. When what? When he died too. Heart attack. 52 years old, ran marathons, no history of heart problems. That was 3 months ago. The house suddenly felt very cold. Ruby? Where are you right now? At school, in my classroom. Philip is at a job interview. She laughed bitterly. Can you believe it? We're trying to just live normal lives while hiding evidence that could bring down one of the richest men in New England. Why didn't you tell me? Because we didn't want to make you a target too. Don't you understand? Anyone who knows about this is in danger. The less you knew, the safer you were. Her voice hardened. Now you know. Now you're involved. So please, Mom, please just put everything back and walk away. I looked at the wall with its gaping hole, at the evidence scattered across my floor, at my reflection in the darkening window. A woman past 60, widow, retired librarian, grandmother to Ruby's 2 children who I rarely saw anymore because of the distance and Ruby's busy schedule. Lies, all of it. They'd been avoiding me to protect me. I can't do that. Mom, I can't put this back and pretend I don't know. These documents need to reach the right people. Safely, legally. And you and Philip need protection. We've tried. Nobody wants to touch this. Dixon has judges in his pocket. Prosecutors. Politicians. Our lawyer died. Philip's supervisor died. We're afraid to trust anyone. I stood up, decision crystallizing in my mind. Then we need to be smarter about this. We need someone beyond Dixon's reach. Someone with no connection to Vermont. No local ties he can exploit. Who? My nephew in Seattle. Thomas. You remember him? Works for the Justice Department. Federal prosecutor. Silence. Then, would he help? He owes me. Thomas's mother, my sister, had died when he was 17. I'd helped raise him, put him through college. And he's 3,000 miles away from Dixon's influence. I can send him copies, see what he says. Copies? Ruby's voice sharpened. Mom, you can't make copies. If Dixon finds out the evidence has been duplicated, if it spreads beyond our control… A sound from outside made me freeze. Footsteps on the gravel driveway. Heavy, deliberate, not the random crunch of deer or wildlife. Someone's here, I whispered. What? I moved to the window, careful to stay in shadow. A black SUV sat next to my car, its engine still running. 2 men in dark suits stood near my porch, one speaking into a phone. 2 men, black SUV. Ruby, how did they know I'm here? Her breathing accelerated into hyperventilation. Oh no, Philip's phone. He's been so paranoid he barely uses it, but he called me this morning from the interview. They must have been monitoring. Mom, you have to get out of there, right now. The doorbell rang. I can't. They're at the front door. Don't answer. Is there a back way out? I thought fast. The basement. There's a bulkhead exit that opens to the backyard. Woods beyond that. Take the evidence, all of it. Don't leave anything behind. Ruby, Mom, please. If they find it, Philip and I are dead. Those documents prove we had access. We had motive to steal them. Dixon will make us disappear and call it suicide or an accident. Please. The doorbell rang again, longer this time. Then a knock. Forceful. I grabbed the tarp and started shoving everything back inside. Documents, drives, the tablet. My hands shook so badly I could barely seal the waterproof container. The knock came again, harder. Mrs. Pierce? A man's voice, smooth and professional. We know you're in there. We just want to talk. I clutched the bundle to my chest and moved toward the basement stairs. My hip ached, arthritis getting worse every year, but I forced myself down the steps as quietly as possible. Mom? Ruby's voice in my ear. Mom? Are you there? Going down to the basement, I breathed. Behind me, I heard the sound of the front door opening. They'd picked the lock or forced it. Heavy footsteps crossed the living room floor above my head. The basement was dark, lit only by weak light through small windows near the ceiling. I navigated around Harold's old workbench, past boxes of Christmas decorations, toward the bulkhead stairs. Please let it open. Please don't let the hinges be rusted shut. Mrs. Pierce, we don't want any trouble. The voice was closer now, at the top of the basement stairs. We just need to ask you some questions about your daughter and son-in-law. I reached the bulkhead and pushed. The door resisted, swollen with moisture and time. I pushed harder, using my shoulder, ignoring the pain shooting through my arthritic joints. I can hear you down there, Mrs. Pierce. The bulkhead gave way with a shriek of protesting hinges. Cool evening air hit my face. I scrambled up and out, the bundle awkward in my arms, and ran, across the back lawn toward the tree line. Behind me, shouts. The bulkhead crashed open again, footsteps pounding across grass. I reached the woods and plunged into the undergrowth, branches tearing at my clothes. My lungs burned. When had I last run like this? 20 years ago? 30? Ruby! I gasped into the phone, still clutched in my hand. Call the police. Now! What? No, they might be compromised. Dixon has... I don't care. Call them anyway. Report a break-in at the lake house. Make noise. Create a record. I stumbled over a root, caught myself against a tree. If these men catch me in the woods with no witnesses, I'm just another old woman who had a tragic accident. The footsteps behind me had slowed. They were tracking me now, taking their time. Why rush? I was 63 and carrying a heavy bundle through unfamiliar woods at dusk. They were younger, stronger, and they knew I couldn't run forever. But they didn't know these woods like I did. Harold and I had hiked every trail around this lake. I knew where the deer paths led, where the creek ran shallow enough to cross, where the old logging road cut through to the main highway. If I could reach that road, flag down a car, find witnesses. A sound to my left made me freeze. The second man. They'd split up, trying to flank me. I changed direction, moving as quietly as I could toward the creek. The sound of running water would mask my footsteps. The bundle felt like it weighed 100 pounds. My arms screamed. My hips sent bolts of pain up my spine with every step. Mom? Ruby's voice, tiny and distant. Mom? I called 911. They're sending someone. Mom, please answer. I couldn't speak, needed all my breath for moving. The creek appeared ahead, silver in the fading light. I splashed across, soaking my shoes, and climbed the opposite bank. Behind me, very close now. Mrs. Pierce, this is foolish. We're not going to hurt you. We just need what you're carrying. I kept moving, using trees for support, forcing my old body to keep going. Just a little farther. The logging road had to be close. Then I saw it through the trees. Headlights. A car on the road, moving slowly. I crashed through the last of the underbrush and stumbled onto the gravel. The car, a police cruiser, pulled to a stop, roof lights beginning to flash. A young officer got out, hand on his holster. Ma'am? Are you Marion Pierce? We got a 911 call. Someone broke into my house, I gasped, clutching the bundle. 2 men. They chased me into the woods. They're still back there. He spoke into his radio, calling for backup. Another cruiser appeared within minutes, then another. The woods filled with flashlights, voices calling out, the organized search of law enforcement. But when they swept the forest, they found no one. The black SUV was gone from my driveway. The only evidence of intrusion was my broken front door lock and the gaping hole in my living room wall. The officer who'd found me, his name tag read Reed, stood in my living room examining the damage. Can you explain what happened to this wall, Mrs. Pierce? I looked at the hole, at the plaster dust on the floor, at the crowbar I'd left lying there, at the bundle I'd refused to let go of, now wrapped in my jacket and sitting on the sofa beside me. Someone broke in and vandalized it, I said. That's why I called 911. He looked at me with the patient skepticism of someone who knows he's being lied to. Before or after you ran into the woods? I panicked when I heard them, grabbed some valuables and ran. What valuables? Family heirlooms, papers, things that matter to me. He glanced at the bundle. I'll need to see what's in there. Make sure nothing's stolen. It's all mine. Then you won't mind showing me." We stared at each other. He was maybe 30, clean-cut, earnest, doing his job. But whose side was he on? Had Dixon bought local police? Or was I becoming paranoid, seeing enemies everywhere? Before I could answer, his radio crackled. He stepped outside to respond. Through the window, I watched him talk to another officer, both their faces serious. Ruby's text arrived. "Don't trust anyone. Philip says Dixon has connections in every police department in Vermont. Say nothing." But I had to say something. I had to explain the broken wall, the chase through the woods, my refusal to show them what I was carrying. Officer Reed returned. His expression changed. More guarded now. "Mrs. Pierce, I need you to come with me to the station, just to make a formal statement." "Am I under arrest?" "No, ma'am. But there are some questions about tonight. And some people want to talk to you." "What people?" "Investigators from the state police. They're very interested in your statement about the break-in." His eyes flickered to the bundle. "Very interested in what you might have found in your wall." My phone buzzed. "Ruby, don't go with them. Lawyer first. Say nothing." But refusing would make me look guilty. Complying might walk me right into Dixon's trap. I clutched the bundle tighter and made my choice. "I want to call my lawyer first." The problem was, I didn't have a lawyer. I'd used one 20 years ago for the real estate closing on the lake house, but he'd retired and moved to Florida. Officer Reed didn't need to know that. "That's your right," he said, though his jaw tightened. "You can make that call at the station. I'll make it here. Then I'll decide if I'm coming with you." His hand moved toward his belt, not to his weapon but to his handcuffs. The gesture was slight, almost unconscious, but I caught it. This young officer was getting instructions I couldn't hear, probably through the earpiece I'd noticed when he'd stepped outside. "Mrs. Pierce, I'm trying to be respectful here, and I appreciate that. But I'm a 63-year-old woman who was just chased through the woods by men who broke into my home. I think I'm entitled to call a lawyer before I go anywhere." We stood in a standoff in my vandalized living room, the hole in the wall gaping like an open mouth. Finally, he nodded. "Make your call, but I'll need to stay here with you." I moved to the kitchen, keeping the bundle with me, and dialed the only number I could think of, my nephew Thomas in Seattle. It was 3 hours earlier there, only 6 p.m. He might still be at his office. He answered on the third ring. "Aunt Marion, is everything okay?" "Thomas, I need your help. Legal help. Right now." His tone shifted immediately from casual to alert. "What's happened?" I glanced at Officer Reed, who stood in the doorway watching me. "I can't explain everything over the phone, but I've discovered evidence of serious crimes. People are after it. The police are here, and I don't know who to trust." A pause. "Where are you?" "My lake house in Vermont. Are you safe?" "For now. But they want me to go to the police station for questioning, and My voice cracked. I hadn't realized how terrified I was until I tried to explain it. "Thomas, Ruby's involved. She and Philip. They're in danger." "Okay." His voice became calm, authoritative. The voice of a federal prosecutor who'd handled cases far worse than mine. "Listen carefully. Don't tell the police anything except that you're invoking your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Don't show them what you're carrying. Don't consent to any searches. Don't sign anything. They'll think I'm guilty of something." "They already think that, or they wouldn't be pressuring you." "Marion, what kind of evidence are we talking about? Financial records? Emails? Documentation of fraud, bribery, environmental crimes? It involves a company called Dixon Development." Silence. When Thomas spoke again, his voice was different. Careful. "Earl Dixon?" "Yes." "You know him?" "I know of the investigation. The FBI's been trying to build a case for 2 years, but witnesses keep recanting or disappearing. Evidence gets lost or destroyed. It's been a nightmare for the prosecutors." He paused. "Your son-in-law took evidence from Dixon?" "He documented what he witnessed while working as a consultant. Now they're hunting for it." "And you have it?" "Yes." "Marion, you need federal protection. Local police in Vermont can't handle this. Dixon has connections." "I know. Ruby told me." Thomas was quiet for a moment, thinking. Put the officer on the phone. I handed my phone to Reed. My attorney wants to speak with you. Reed's expression cycled through skepticism, annoyance, and then shock as Thomas identified himself. I could hear my nephew's voice through the phone speaker, though not his words. The conversation lasted 3 minutes. Reed's posture changed, became more formal, and he stepped outside again. When he returned, he handed back my phone. Your attorney, your nephew, has made a compelling case. He's contacting the FBI field office in Burlington. They'll be sending agents to take custody of you and whatever evidence you're protecting. Custody. Protective custody. It's the safest option. He looked almost apologetic. Ma'am, I'm just a county cop. If what your nephew says is true, this is way above my pay grade. The feds will be here within the hour. Until then, I'm supposed to keep you and the evidence secure. I didn't trust it. The past 3 hours had taught me not to trust anything. I'd like to wait outside. In sight of the road. He nodded. I'll wait with you. We sat in his cruiser, the bundle between my feet, watching headlights pass on the main road. Reed made small talk about the weather, the foliage season, how beautiful Vermont was this time of year. I answered mechanically, my mind racing. Ruby called twice. I let it go to voicemail. I couldn't explain what was happening, not with Reed sitting 2 feet away. 40 minutes later, 3 black SUVs pulled into my driveway. My heart jumped. Were these Dixon's men again? But Reed relaxed. That's them. The FBI. 6 agents emerged, all in tactical gear, all professional and efficient. The lead agent, a woman in her 40s named Neil, showed me her credentials and explained the situation with calm authority. Mrs. Pierce, we understand you have evidence related to Dixon development. We'd like to take possession of that evidence and place you in protective custody until we can fully assess the threat level. What about my daughter, my son-in-law? We're sending teams to their location now. They'll be protected. I looked at Agent Neil, trying to read her face. Was she genuine, or another player in Dixon's network? How did you tell the difference between real federal agents and skilled impersonators? Thomas had said trust the FBI. I had to trust someone. I handed over the bundle. Neil opened it carefully, her team gathering around. I watched their faces as they examined the contents. The tablet, the documents, the drives. Professional masks slipped slightly. Eyes widened. Glances were exchanged. Mrs. Pierce, Neil said quietly, this is significant. Very significant. We need to get you somewhere secure immediately. They drove me to a hotel near Burlington, a generic business establishment that could have been anywhere in America. 2 agents stayed with me in the room. 1 male, 1 female. Both armed. Both silent except to offer me water or ask if I needed anything. I tried calling Ruby. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I tried Philip. Same thing. Your family is being secured, the female agent, Torres, assured me. Communications restricted for everyone's safety. I want to talk to them. In the morning, after we've assessed the situation. But morning came, and I still couldn't reach them. Agent Neil arrived at 8 a.m. with coffee and a tablet computer. She sat across from me at the small hotel table and pulled up a document. We've had our digital forensics team working through the night on what you provided. Mrs. Pierce, your son-in-law documented everything. Bank transfers to state officials, falsified environmental reports, bribes to building inspectors, threats made to whistleblowers. She looked at me directly. This could bring down not just Dixon, but a dozen other people in his network. That's good, isn't it? It is. But it also makes you and your family extremely valuable targets. She hesitated. There's something else. Something we found in the emails that concerns your daughter directly. My stomach dropped. What? Neil turned the tablet to show me an email chain. The sender was Philip. The recipient was someone named J. Bradford at an email address I didn't recognize. I read the messages, my hands beginning to shake. Philip had been communicating with someone for months, someone he called Brad. In the emails, Philip discussed payment, substantial payment, in exchange for the evidence, hundreds of thousands of dollars. He'd been negotiating to sell what he'd documented, not turn it over to authorities. This doesn't make sense, I said. Ruby told me they were trying to go to the authorities. That they were scared. They may have been scared, but your son-in-law was also trying to profit. Neil's expression was sympathetic, but firm. Mrs. Pierce, we believe Philip was attempting to sell this information to a rival of Dixon's. J. Bradford is an alias used by Alexander Brennan, a real estate developer who's been trying to push Dixon out of Vermont for years. The emails suggest Philip was asking for $300,000. I couldn't breathe. No, Philip wouldn't. There's more. She pulled up another document. We found evidence that Philip had been in contact with Dixon's people too, playing both sides. He may have been trying to auction the evidence to the highest bidder. Does Ruby know? We don't know. That's what we need to find out. Neil leaned forward. Mrs. Pierce, I need to ask you directly. Did your daughter know her husband was trying to sell this evidence? Was she complicit? No, absolutely not. Ruby's a teacher. She's honest. She wouldn't. People do surprising things when they're desperate, when they're in debt, when their spouse is manipulating them. I thought about Ruby's tears on the security camera footage, her fear on the phone, her insistence that I hide the evidence again. Had she been protecting a criminal investigation? Or a criminal enterprise? I want to see my daughter. Now. Neil nodded slowly. We brought her and Philip in this morning for questioning. They're in separate rooms downstairs. You can see Ruby, but Marion... She put her hand on mine. Be prepared. She may not tell you the truth. And you need to decide whether you're going to protect her or help us. They took me down in the service elevator to a conference room on the second floor. Ruby sat at a table, looking exhausted, her eyes red from crying. When she saw me, she stood up so fast her chair tipped backward. Mom! I hugged her, feeling how thin she'd become, how fragile. When had my strong, capable daughter turned into this frightened shadow? Are you okay? I asked. They've been asking me questions for hours. About Philip, about the evidence, about what we knew. She pulled back, gripping my arms. Mom, what did you tell them? The truth. That I found the evidence. That you told me you were trying to go to the authorities. Her face crumpled. We were. I swear we were. But Philip... She stopped, looking at the mirror that was obviously one-way glass. Can we talk privately? Agent Neil, standing by the door, shook her head. Anything you say needs to be on record, Ms. Pierce. Ruby turned to me, desperation in her eyes. Mom, they think Philip was trying to sell the evidence. They think I knew about it. They're saying we could be charged with extortion, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. Were you trying to sell it? No, I thought we were building a case to take to prosecutors. Philip told me he was documenting everything to protect us, to have insurance if Dixon came after us. He said we needed leverage. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I didn't know he was talking to other people. I didn't know about any payments. You have to believe me. I wanted to believe her. But doubt had planted itself in my mind, growing like poison ivy. Why did you hide it in my wall? Philip said it was the safest place. Somewhere Dixon wouldn't think to look. I argued with him, Mom. I didn't want to involve you, but he said it was just temporary, until we could find the right person to give it to. She gripped my hands. I never wanted you to find it. I was going to get it out before you came up for your visit, but then you came early and you told me not to look. You told me to put it back. Because I was scared. I'm still scared. Dixon's people broke into your house. They chased you through the woods. Don't you understand? This evidence is a death sentence. For all of us. Agent Neil stepped forward. Ms. Pierce, if you cooperate fully, tell us everything you know about your husband's communications, his contacts, his intentions. We can offer you protection, possibly immunity. I don't know anything. I thought we were doing the right thing. Then help us prove that. Neil's voice hardened. Help us figure out who your husband was really working for. Because right now, the evidence suggests he was playing a very dangerous game with some very dangerous people. The door opened. Another agent entered, whispered something to Neil. Her expression changed, became grave. Mrs. Pierce, we need to move you both. Now. What's happened? Philip is asking for a deal. He says he has more evidence, hidden in a second location. He's willing to give it to us in exchange for full immunity and witness protection. She paused. He also says your daughter knew everything, that she helped him plan the whole thing. Ruby went white. That's a lie. He's lying. But Agent Neil wasn't looking at Ruby anymore. She was looking at me. Marion, we found something else in the evidence you provided. Bank statements for an account in your name. An offshore account with $200,000 in it. Deposited 3 months ago. The room spun. I don't have an offshore account. I don't have that kind of money. The account was opened using your social security number and copies of your identification. Someone set it up in your name. Neil's expression was apologetic, but firm. Mrs. Pierce, did you agree to let your daughter and son-in-law use your identity to hide money? No, I never. I turned to Ruby. Tell them I had nothing to do with this. But Ruby was staring at the floor, crying silently, and she wouldn't meet my eyes. In that moment, I understood. Philip hadn't just hidden evidence in my wall. He'd hidden money in my name. He'd made me part of whatever scheme he was running, insurance against getting caught. And Ruby, my daughter, had known. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to make her an accomplice instead of a victim. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Mom, Ruby whispered. Mom, I can explain. But Neil was already reading me my rights, and I was too stunned to protest as they led me to another room, leaving my daughter behind, both of us trapped in a nightmare of lies I was only beginning to understand. The worst part? I still didn't know whose side anyone was on, or whether there was a side left to be on. They put me in a room by myself. Not a cell, they made that clear, but it felt like one. Gray walls, a table bolted to the floor, chairs that scraped against linoleum when I moved. Agent Neil sat across from me with a manila folder thick with documents. Mrs. Pierce, I want to believe you're a victim here. I really do. But you need to help me understand how your identification ended up opening an offshore account that received a substantial deposit right around the time Philip was negotiating with Alexander Brennan's people. I didn't open any account. Someone stole my identity. Who had access to your personal documents? Your social security card? Driver's license? Passport? I thought about my desk at home, my filing cabinet. Unlocked. Ruby had a key to my house. She'd had one since she moved out 20 years ago. She could have walked in any time while I was at work, at the grocery store, visiting friends. My own daughter. Ruby had access, I said quietly. Neil made a note. Did you ever give her explicit permission to use your identification? No. Did she ever ask to borrow your documents? No. Did you know she and Philip were in financial trouble? I hesitated. She mentioned it once. Said Philip's job loss had been difficult, but they refused my help because they'd found another way to solve their money problems. Neil pulled out a document, slid it across to me. This is a statement from the offshore bank. The account was opened 3 months ago using your credentials. $200,000 was deposited 6 weeks later. 3 days after that, $20,000 was withdrawn and transferred to a domestic account belonging to your daughter. The numbers blurred before my eyes. She took money from it? She accessed it. Whether she knew where it came from originally, that's what we're trying to determine. Neil leaned back. Mrs. Pierce, your daughter is claiming she thought the account was a legitimate inheritance from your late husband. That Philip told her your husband had set up a secret account before he died, and that you'd given them permission to manage it. That's ridiculous. Harold died 2 years ago. He barely had $20,000 in his 401k. Let alone $200,000 in some offshore account. Yet your daughter accessed the money, used it to pay off credit cards, make a mortgage payment. She didn't question where it came from. I thought about Ruby 3 months ago, how she'd suddenly seemed less stressed when we'd talked on the phone, how she'd mentioned Philip found some work, and things were looking up. I'd been relieved. Now I felt sick. Maybe she wanted to believe it, I said. Maybe she was desperate enough not to ask questions. Or maybe she knew exactly what her husband was doing and helped him do it. Neil closed the folder. Marion, I'm going to be straight with you. The evidence is complicated. Philip is claiming Ruby orchestrated everything. Ruby is claiming Philip deceived her. And the paper trail suggests you were either complicit or catastrophically careless with your personal information. Without your full cooperation, a prosecutor could charge all 3 of you. With what? Wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit extortion, obstruction of justice. She counted them on her fingers. The account in your name makes you look complicit. The money transferred to Ruby makes her look guilty. And Philip's communications with both Dixon's rivals and Dixon himself suggest he was playing a dangerous game of double-dealing that got way out of control. My hands trembled. What do you want from me? The truth, all of it, starting with what you really knew about your daughter's situation. So I told her. Everything. How Ruby had become distant over the past year. How the visits became less frequent, the phone calls shorter. How she'd seemed anxious, distracted, but blamed it on work stress. How Philip had always been harder to read, charming but evasive. And how I'd never entirely trusted him but kept quiet because Ruby loved him. I told her about finding the evidence, about watching the security footage, about Ruby's panicked phone calls begging me to hide everything and walk away. I told her about the men who'd chased me through the woods and how terrified I'd been that they'd catch me in the dark. Neil listened without interrupting, her pen moving across a notepad. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Marion, I believe you. But belief isn't enough. I need you to help us prove Ruby was manipulated by her husband, not complicit with him. And I need you to prove your identity was stolen, not borrowed with permission. How? Tell me about your relationship with your daughter. When did things change? When did you first suspect something was wrong? I thought back, trying to pinpoint the moment. About 8 months ago, just after Philip lost his job, Ruby called me one night, late. She was crying, said things were falling apart, that Philip was acting strange, paranoid, that he'd started coming home at odd hours with documents he wouldn't explain. She was scared. Did you offer to help? Of course. I told her to come stay with me, bring the kids. She refused, said Philip needed her, that leaving would make things worse. I swallowed hard. That was the last honest conversation we had. After that, every call felt rehearsed, like she was reading from a script. Neil made more notes. Did Philip ever contact you directly during this time? Once, about 6 months ago. He asked about the lake house, whether I still owned it, whether anyone else had keys, whether I went there often. I thought he was just making conversation. The memory turned sour. He was planning where to hide the evidence. Did he ask about your personal documents? Your social security number? Not directly, but he'd been to my house dozens of times over the years. He knew where I kept things. Ruby probably told him. A knock at the door interrupted us. Another agent entered, whispered to Neil. Her expression darkened. Marion, we have a problem. A lawyer just showed up demanding to see you. Claims he represents you and that we're violating your rights by questioning you without counsel present. I didn't hire a lawyer, except my nephew, and he's in Seattle. This one's local, very expensive, and very connected to Earl Dixon. My blood went cold. Whitmore sent him? Presumably, which means Dixon knows you're here, knows we have you in protective custody, and is making moves. She stood. I need to consult with my team. Don't speak to that lawyer. Don't sign anything. And don't leave this room. She left me alone. I sat in the silence, my mind racing. Dixon had sent a lawyer. That meant he was either trying to control the narrative or eliminate threats. A lawyer could find out what I'd told the FBI, what evidence they had, how strong their case was. He could report back to Dixon, who could then, what? Have me killed? Discredited? Framed for crimes I didn't commit? The offshore account already made me look guilty. If Dixon's lawyer could muddy the waters further, suggest I was a willing participant in Philip's schemes, the FBI might decide I wasn't worth protecting. They might even decide I was a better target than Dixon himself. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I'd forgotten they'd let me keep it. A text from an unknown number. Mrs. Pierce. This is Alexander Brennan. We need to talk. Alone. I stared at the message. Brennan. The rival developer Philip had been negotiating with. How did he have my number? How did he know where I was? Another text. Your son-in-law made promises he couldn't keep. Now you're all in danger. I can help, but only if you trust me. Meet me outside the hotel, back parking lot. 1 hour. Come alone or the deal's off. My hands shook. This was a trap. Obviously a trap. Brennan wanted the evidence, or wanted to silence me, or both. Going to meet him would be suicide. But what if it wasn't a trap? What if Philip really had made promises to Brennan, taken money, or made deals that put us all at risk? The FBI thought Philip was playing both sides. What if he'd promised the evidence to Brennan and then tried to sell it to Dixon too? That would make Ruby and me loose ends in a deal gone wrong. The door opened. Agent Torres entered with a bottle of water. Agent Neal will be back soon. Can I get you anything else? I need to use the bathroom. She escorted me down the hall to a small restroom. I locked the door and looked at myself in the mirror. 63 years old, gray hair, lines around my eyes. I looked like someone's grandmother. I looked harmless. Invisible. Maybe that was my advantage. I texted back, "How do I know you're really Brennan? How do I know this isn't Dixon pretending?" The response came immediately. "Your son-in-law kept detailed records, including recordings of our conversations. I know things about what he documented, things the FBI hasn't found yet, things that could save your daughter or destroy her. Your choice." My finger hovered over the screen. This was insane. I should show these texts to Agent Neal immediately. Let the FBI handle it. That was the smart, safe choice. But the smart, safe choice had already gotten me implicated in financial crimes I didn't commit. The smart, safe choice had my daughter crying in an interrogation room, possibly facing prison. The smart, safe choice assumed the FBI could protect us from a billionaire with infinite resources and no conscience. I made a decision I knew was reckless. I deleted the text messages and returned to the interrogation room. 20 minutes later, Agent Neal returned with my nephew Thomas on a video call. His face filled her tablet screen, and the relief of seeing someone I could truly trust almost broke me. "Aunt Marion, are you okay?" "I don't know what I am anymore." Listen to me carefully. Neal has briefed me on everything. The offshore account, Ruby's involvement, Philip's deals. It's a mess, but we can work through it. You need to stay in protective custody. Don't talk to anyone except through your lawyers, me and whoever I assign locally. Thomas, they think I'm guilty. They think you might be. There's a difference. We're going to prove you're not. But you have to trust the process. Trust Agent Neal. She's good people. I wanted to trust. But trust had gotten me here, in this gray room, with my daughter in custody and my identity stolen and my entire life turned inside out. "There's something else," Neal said, looking at her phone. "We just got word that Philip has disappeared." "What do you mean disappeared?" "He was being transferred from this location to a secure facility. The transport van was ambushed 10 miles outside Burlington. 2 agents were injured. Philip is gone." The room tilted. Dixon? Or Brennan? Or someone else entirely? "We don't know." Neal's jaw tightened. "Marion, this changes everything. Philip is either a victim of kidnapping or he's working with whoever took him. Either way, everyone connected to this case is now in immediate danger." "What about Ruby? My grandchildren?" "Ruby's still here, secured. The children are with their other grandmother in Massachusetts under surveillance. You're all protected." She paused. "But Marion, Philip knows where you hide things. He knows your habits, your properties, your routines. If he's working with Dixon or Brennan, he can tell them everything, including the fact that I had a lake house in Vermont, a house I'd already been chased from once, a house that was isolated, vulnerable, perfect for an ambush." My phone buzzed again. Another text from Brennan. "Your son-in-law just made his choice. He's with Dixon now. If you want to save your daughter, meet me, 30 minutes. Or I go to the press with everything I know about her involvement." I looked at Agent Neal, at Thomas on the screen, at the walls of this room that felt more like a prison with every passing second. Philip had vanished. Dixon had sent a lawyer. Brennan was threatening to expose Ruby. The FBI couldn't protect us from all of them at once. I was 63 years old, a retired librarian, a widow, a grandmother. I should have been planning garden layouts and knitting blankets and complaining about my arthritis. Instead, I was about to do something phenomenally stupid. "Agent Neal," I said calmly, "I need to use the bathroom again. I think the stress is affecting my stomach. She nodded sympathetically. Torres will take you. As Torres walked me down the hall, I thought about Harold. What would he have done? Probably told me to trust the authorities, stay safe, let the professionals handle it. But Harold wasn't here, and the professionals were losing control. Sometimes the only person you could trust was yourself. In the bathroom, I locked the door and climbed onto the toilet. Outside, a burst of static crackled through the agent's radios, followed by hurried footsteps moving rapidly down the hallway, as if something urgent had pulled their attention away. The window was small, but manageable. I'd squeezed through tighter spaces. The drop to the ground was maybe 8 feet. I could handle that. I could handle whatever came next. Because my daughter was in trouble, and I was done waiting for other people to save her. The window gave way easier than I expected. My arthritis screamed as I pulled myself up and through, but adrenaline made me strong. I dropped to the ground, stumbled, caught myself against the wall. The back parking lot stretched before me, mostly empty in the late afternoon shadows. A silver sedan sat in the far corner, engine running. As I approached, the driver's window lowered. The man inside was younger than I expected, maybe 50, with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that assessed me quickly. Mrs. Pierce, get in, quickly. I hesitated. This could still be a trap. This could be the last mistake I ever made. Your daughter has about 6 hours before the FBI decides she's more useful as a defendant than a witness. Do you want to help her or not? I got in. Yet something about how effortlessly he had found me, how confidently he approached, flickered uneasily in the back of my mind, as if someone, somewhere had allowed this moment to unfold. Alexander Brennan drove us away from the hotel, taking side streets and checking his mirrors constantly. He didn't speak until we were on a rural highway heading south. I'm going to be direct with you, Mrs. Pierce. Your son-in-law approached me 4 months ago with an interesting proposition. He had evidence of Dixon's criminal activities, evidence that could destroy my competitor and clear the field for my development projects. He wanted $300,000 for it. Did you pay him? I paid him $50,000 as a deposit, told him he'd get the rest when I had the evidence in hand. His jaw tightened. He never delivered. Kept stalling, saying he needed more time, that it was too dangerous to move. Then 2 weeks ago, I found out why. He'd been negotiating with Dixon, too, playing us against each other, trying to drive up the price. My stomach churned. What did Dixon offer him? $500,000 and a job. Philip was supposed to hand over all the evidence so Dixon could destroy it. Philip would get his money and disappear with your daughter and the kids. New identities. New life. Brennan glanced at me. But Philip got greedy. He made copies. Kept some back. Thought he could still sell to me after taking Dixon's money. That's why they came after him. That's why they'll kill him. And your daughter. And you. If they think you know where the remaining copies are. He turned down a dirt road I didn't recognize. Do you know where they are? No. The FBI has what I found. That's not all of it. Philip told me he made 3 complete sets. 1 in your lake house. That's the one you found. 1 in a safety deposit box. And 1 hidden in his house. Brennan stopped the car in front of an old barn. We're going to that house right now. We're going to find that evidence before Dixon does. And then I'm going to use it to bury him. Why should I help you? You're just another rich man trying to profit from this. Because I'm the only one who can save your daughter. He turned to face me fully. The FBI thinks she's complicit. They're building a case that she helped Philip orchestrate everything. But I have recordings of conversations with Philip. Conversations where he explicitly says Ruby knows nothing, that he's been lying to her, using her. Those recordings could prove her innocence. Then give them to the FBI. And lose my leverage? Mrs. Pierce, I didn't get where I am by being stupid. I'll trade those recordings for the evidence. All of it. Then Dixon goes down, I win, and your daughter walks free. He opened his door. You have 10 seconds to decide. Help me, or I'll leave you here and cut my own deal with the FBI. I thought of Ruby in that interrogation room, her face pale with fear. I thought of my grandchildren hiding with their other grandmother, confused and scared. I thought of Philip, wherever he was, whose greed and lies had destroyed everything. What do you need me to do? Brennan smiled. Ruby's house is being watched by the FBI. But you have a key, don't you? And you're just a concerned grandmother checking on things. They might let you in, or at least not stop you immediately. We drove to Ruby's suburban neighborhood as twilight fell. Sure enough, an unmarked car sat 3 houses down, 2 agents visible in the front seat. Brennan parked around the corner. Go to the house. Act natural. Use your key. Once you're inside, you have maybe 5 minutes before they react. Philip told me he hid the evidence in the basement behind a false panel in the water heater closet. Get it, and bring it out the back door. I'll be waiting in the alley. What if it's not there? Then we're all in trouble. I walked up Ruby's front path with my heart hammering. The house looked exactly as it always had. Neat lawn, flower boxes in the windows, a child's bicycle lying on its side by the garage. Normal, innocent. A lie. I used my key. The door opened into silence. The FBI had clearly already searched the place. Drawers were slightly open, cushions not quite straight, but they'd left everything mostly intact. I found the basement stairs and descended into darkness. My phone's flashlight cut through the gloom. The water heater stood in a small closet, humming quietly. Behind it, the wall looked solid. I pressed, probed, ran my hands over the drywall. Nothing. Had Philip lied to Brennan too? Made up a hiding spot that didn't exist? Then I noticed the screws. 4 of them, painted over but visible if you looked carefully. I needed a screwdriver. I searched frantically through a toolbox on a nearby shelf and found one. The screws came out reluctantly. The panel pulled away to reveal a shallow space. Inside, another waterproof container, identical to the one I'd found at the lake house. Footsteps above me. Heavy. Multiple people. Mrs. Pierce, FBI, we know you're in here. I grabbed the container and ran for the back door. The yard was dark, the alley darker. Brennan's sedan appeared, door already open. I threw myself inside. Drive! He accelerated before I'd even closed the door. Behind us, I heard shouting, saw flashlights cutting through the darkness. But we were already gone, racing through residential streets toward the highway. Did you get it? I held up the container. Now what? Now we open it. Verify it's the real thing. Then I make my calls. He pulled into an abandoned strip mall, parking behind the building. Open it. My hands shook as I unsealed the container. Inside, more USB drives, more documents, another tablet. But also something else. A handwritten letter. I recognized Ruby's handwriting immediately. Mom, it began. If you're reading this, everything has gone wrong. Philip made me write this. He said it was insurance, proof that I knew what he was doing. But I'm writing the truth, hoping you'll understand and forgive me. I didn't know what Philip was doing until 3 months ago. He told me about the evidence, said we could finally be free of debt, start over. I thought he meant we'd go to the authorities, get a reward, maybe witness protection. I didn't know he was trying to sell it. When I found out, I confronted him. He said it was too late to back out, that we were already implicated. He opened that account in your name without telling me. By the time I discovered it, money had already been moved. He said if I went to the police, you'd be arrested too. That we'd all go to prison. I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have come to you immediately. I should have trusted you to help us. Instead, I let Philip convince me that staying quiet was the only way to protect everyone. If something happens to me, please take care of my children. Tell them their mother loved them more than anything. And tell them that sometimes even adults make terrible mistakes when they're scared. The evidence in this container is complete. Everything Philip documented. It can destroy Dixon, but it can also destroy us if the wrong people get it. I don't know who to trust anymore. I'm not sure there's anyone left to trust. Except you. I trust you, Mom. Whatever you decide to do with this, I know you'll choose what's right. You always do. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Tears blurred my vision. I looked up to find Brennan watching me, his expression calculating, touching. Now hand it over. The recordings first. The ones that prove Ruby's innocent. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Mrs. Pierce, I don't have any recordings. I never did. I needed you to get me this evidence, and you did. Thank you for your service. Cold understanding washed over me. You lied. I did what I needed to do. Just like your son-in-law. Just like everyone in this mess. He reached for the container. Give it to me, and I'll let you walk away. You can go back to the FBI. Tell them whatever story you want. They might even believe you eventually. And Ruby is on her own. She made her choices. You've made yours. His hand moved to his jacket. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I thought about my daughter in that interrogation room. About my grandchildren. About Harold, who'd always said I was too trusting, too quick to believe the best in people. But I'd also been a librarian for 40 years. I knew how to research, how to verify, how to look for the truth beneath the surface. And in the past 6 hours, I'd learned something important. I'd been texting with Brennan while in FBI custody, while they'd taken my phone twice to charge it in another room. The FBI had access to everything. They'd seen those texts. They'd let me escape. They'd let Brennan take me. Because they'd been tracking us the entire time. You know what I think, Mr. Brennan? I said calmly. I think you've been very foolish. His expression changed. What are you? The doors burst open. FBI agents swarmed the car, weapons drawn, voices shouting commands. Brennan was pulled from the driver's seat, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. Agent Neil appeared at my door, helping me out. Are you okay, Marion? I'm fine. Tell me you recorded everything he said. She smiled. Every word. And we've had teams watching Ruby's house for days, waiting to see who'd make a move for the evidence. We knew about the hiding spot. Philip told us about it when we first brought him in. The kidnapping was staged to draw out everyone involved. Philip is alive? Very much so. In protective custody. Cooperating fully. She guided me toward another vehicle. You did well, Marion. Better than we expected. When we saw Brennan's texts, we made the decision to let him contact you, see what he'd reveal. You used me as bait. We protected you. There were agents within 50 feet at all times. We would never have let you get hurt. She paused. But yes, we used you. I'm sorry. I should have been angry. But all I felt was exhausted relief. What happens to Ruby now? We've been interviewing her all day, cross-referencing her story with Philip's, with the evidence, with her letter. Marion, your daughter is telling the truth. She was manipulated, threatened, kept in the dark about the full scope of what Philip was doing. We're recommending immunity in exchange for her testimony against both Dixon and Brennan. And me? The offshore account was identity theft. We have proof Philip opened it without your knowledge or consent. You're clear. Neil smiled. You're actually a hero. Without you finding that first batch of evidence, we'd still be stumbling in the dark. They took me back to the hotel where Ruby was waiting. When we saw each other, no words were necessary. I held my daughter while she cried, feeling how fragile she'd become, how much damage had been done to all of us. I'm sorry, she kept saying. I'm so sorry, Mom. I know, baby. I know. Over the next 3 hours, Agent Neil explained everything. Philip had documented years of Dixon's crimes, but had gotten seduced by the potential payoff. When he'd approached Brennan, he'd set off a chain of events that spiraled out of control. Both men had wanted the evidence destroyed. Dixon to protect himself, Brennan to eliminate his competitor without that same evidence being used against him later by prosecutors. The safety deposit box Philip had mentioned? It contained copies he'd planned to sell to a third party, a journalist. But he'd never gotten the chance. The fake kidnapping had been the FBI's way of forcing everyone's hand. With Philip missing, all the players had been forced to make their moves quickly, exposing themselves. What happens now? I asked. Now we build our cases. Dixon, Brennan, and about 15 other people are going down for corruption, fraud, bribery, environmental crimes, conspiracy. It's going to be one of the biggest prosecutions in Vermont history. Neil looked at Ruby. And you and your husband are going to testify. With immunity deals, new identities afterward if you want them, and protection until all the trials are over. Ruby looked at me. What about you, Mom? What will you do? I thought about my lake house with its destroyed wall, about my quiet life that had been turned upside down, about being 63 and having to start over in some ways, learning that the people I loved were capable of lies and manipulation, but also learning that I was stronger than I'd thought. Smarter. Braver. I'm going to fix my wall, I said, and then I'm going to be there for my grandchildren while their parents testify. And after that? I smiled. I'm going to live my life without any more secrets. Ruby hugged me again. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. For the first time in months, we laughed. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. 3 months later, I stood in the living room of my lake house, examining the repaired wall. The contractor had done excellent work. You couldn't tell anything had ever been hidden there. Fresh wallpaper, perfectly hung. The same pattern Harold had chosen all those years ago. But this time, I'd picked a lighter shade, more vivid, a symbol of things being brought into the light. Outside, snow drifted across the frozen lake. Inside, a fire crackled in the stone fireplace. I'd thought I might never want to return here after everything that had happened, but this house was mine, my refuge, my choice. I refused to let criminals and conspiracies steal it from me. The trials had begun 2 weeks ago. Dixon's face was all over the news, his expensive lawyers arguing motions and filing appeals. Brennan had tried to cut a deal, but the FBI had him on recordings admitting to conspiracy and attempting to obtain evidence through coercion. Philip and Ruby were in a secure location, preparing to testify. I'd seen them once, briefly, when Agent Neal had arranged a supervised visit. Ruby looked better, stronger. The haunted expression had faded, replaced by something harder but healthier. The face of someone who'd survived a nightmare and was determined to rebuild. Philip looked diminished. Thin, gray, older than his 42 years. He'd apologized to me, a long, stammering speech about how he'd never meant for things to spiral out of control, how he'd thought he was protecting his family. I'd listened without comment. What was there to say? His intentions had paved a road to destruction, and we were all still walking it. But we were walking forward. That was something. My phone rang. Thomas, checking in as he did every few days. How are you holding up, Aunt Marion? I'm surviving. The wall is fixed. The house feels like mine again. Good. I've been following the trial proceedings. The prosecutors are doing excellent work. They're estimating Dixon will get 20 to 30 years if convicted on all counts. And Ruby and Philip? Full immunity. It's already been finalized. Once they testify, they're free. New identities are optional. They haven't decided yet. He paused. Marion, you did an extraordinary thing. You saved your daughter. You brought down a criminal empire. You should be proud. I'm tired, Thomas. That's what I am. He laughed gently. You're allowed to be, but you're also allowed to feel proud. Most people would have trusted the wrong person, made the wrong choice. You navigated an impossible situation with wisdom and courage. After we hung up, I sat by the fire and thought about that. Wisdom and courage. At 63, I'd always assumed my important years were behind me, that life was now about maintaining what I'd built, enjoying what remained. I'd never imagined being tested like this, but I had been tested, and I'd survived. The doorbell rang, startling me. I wasn't expecting anyone. The nearest neighbor was a mile away, and I'd told everyone I wanted solitude this weekend. Through the window, I saw a woman on my porch, 30-something, professional clothes, carrying a briefcase. She didn't look threatening, but I'd learned that meant nothing. I opened the door but kept the chain engaged. Can I help you? Mrs. Pierce? My name is Jennifer Walsh. I'm a journalist with the Boston Globe. I was hoping I could ask you a few questions about the Dixon case. I'm not giving interviews. I understand, but this isn't about the trial. It's about something else. Something I think you need to know. She held up a folder. May I come in? Just for 10 minutes. If you want me to leave after that, I will. Every instinct screamed at me to refuse. But curiosity, the same trait that had made me a good librarian, won out. I let her in. Jennifer Walsh sat at my kitchen table and opened the folder. I've been investigating Earl Dixon for 3 years, long before the FBI case. I knew he was corrupt, but I could never prove it. Sources would disappear or recant. Evidence would vanish. I was starting to think he was untouchable. He wasn't. No. Thanks to your son-in-law's documentation and your courage in bringing it forward. But here's what concerns me, Mrs. Pierce. In my investigation, I found something the FBI either doesn't know about or isn't pursuing. A connection between Dixon and several offshore accounts. Not the one opened in your name, but others. Old accounts. And some of those accounts show transactions involving local officials, including judges. My stomach tightened. What are you saying? I'm saying Dixon's corruption goes deeper than anyone realizes. And there are people in positions of power who are desperate to keep that hidden. People who might want to discredit the case against him. Or discredit the witnesses. She pulled out a document. This is a bank record showing a payment from one of Dixon's shell companies to a consulting firm. That firm is owned by the brother of Patricia Harlan, the judge who'll be overseeing part of Dixon's trial. The FBI needs to see this. They do. But I wanted you to see it first. Because if this judge is compromised, she could manipulate the proceedings. She could create grounds for mistrial. She could make sure Dixon walks. Jennifer looked at me steadily. Your family's immunity deals are contingent on successful prosecution. And just to be clear, she added, Judge Harlan has no connection whatsoever to the local officer named Reed who worked your break-in case. If Dixon beats the charges, those deals could be challenged. Ruby and Philip could still face consequences. Why are you telling me this? Why not go straight to the FBI? Because I know you'll make sure it gets to the right people. Because you've proven you can't be intimidated or bought. And because I trust you in a way I don't trust anyone else involved in this mess. She closed the folder and slid it across to me. This is yours now. Copies of everything. Do with it what you think is right. After she left, I sat alone with the folder, feeling the weight of it. More evidence, more secrets, more choices to make. I called Agent Neal. She arrived the next morning with 2 other agents, reviewed the documents Jennifer had given me, and her expression grew darker with each page. How did a journalist get this when we didn't? Maybe she was looking in different places. Maybe she had sources you don't. Does it matter? It matters because it means there are more leaks than we thought. More people involved. She looked at me. Marion, this is significant. If Judge Harlan is compromised, we need to get her recused immediately. But that means filing motions, exposing these records, possibly triggering a cascade of new investigations. The trial could be delayed for months. Better delayed than corrupted. I agree, but I need you to understand, the longer this drags out, the longer Ruby and Philip stay in limbo, the longer you're all at risk of retaliation. Then work faster, but do it right. I met her eyes. Agent Neal, 3 months ago I was a retired librarian who spent her days reading and gardening. Now I've been chased through woods, implicated in money laundering, used as bait in an FBI operation, and handed evidence of judicial corruption by an investigative journalist. I'm too old and too tired to care about timelines. I care about justice. Real justice. Not the kind that lets criminals walk because we were in too much of a hurry to do things properly. She smiled slightly. You sound like a prosecutor. I sound like someone who's learned the hard way that shortcuts lead to disaster. The documents I'd provided led to Judge Harlan's recusal within 2 weeks. Her brother was arrested for money laundering. 3 other officials connected to Dixon's shell companies resigned or were suspended pending investigation. The case was assigned to a federal judge with an impeccable reputation. The trial resumed a month later. I attended the first day, sitting in the back of the courtroom. Ruby and Philip testified over 3 grueling days. I watched my daughter describe how her husband had deceived her, how she'd discovered the truth too late, how she'd been trapped between protecting her family and doing what was right. She cried on the stand. The jury listened with sympathy and attention. Philip's testimony was harder to watch. He detailed everything: the crimes he'd witnessed, the documents he'd stolen, his attempts to sell the evidence, his growing panic as both Dixon and Brennan closed in. He admitted his greed, his cowardice, his lies. The jury's faces were less sympathetic toward him, but both testimonies were devastating for Dixon. The evidence was overwhelming. The paper trail was irrefutable. Brennan took a plea deal and agreed to testify against Dixon. His testimony added another layer of damning detail: bribes, threats, environmental destruction, fraud on a massive scale. The verdict came 6 weeks later: guilty on 43 counts. I wasn't in the courtroom when they read it. I was at Ruby's house, the one she'd be returning to now that the trial was over, helping pack up her children's things for their homecoming. The FBI had kept them safe, moving them twice during the trial, but now they could come home. My phone buzzed with the news. I called Ruby immediately. "It's over," I told her. "He's guilty. All counts." She broke down crying. In the background, I heard Philip's voice, asking what had happened, and Ruby telling him through tears. When she came back on the line, her voice was steadier. "Mom, I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me. You're my daughter. This is what mothers do. No, this is what extraordinary mothers do. Most people would have given up on me, would have believed I was guilty, would have protected themselves instead of fighting for me." She paused. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know it'll take years to rebuild your trust. But I want you to know, I'm going to be better. I'm going to be the person you always believed I was. You already are that person, Ruby. You just forgot for a while." Over the following weeks, life began to resemble normal. Philip and Ruby decided not to take new identities. They wanted to rebuild their lives here, face what they'd done, start over with honesty rather than more hiding. Philip was looking for work, going to therapy, trying to understand how he'd lost his way so completely. Ruby returned to teaching. The grandchildren came to visit me at the lake house. We hiked the trails Harold and I had loved. We fished in the creek. We roasted marshmallows by the fire. They asked questions about what had happened. Children always knew more than adults thought. And I answered honestly but gently. "Why did Daddy do bad things?" my grandson asked. He was 8, old enough to understand that the world was complicated. Because he was scared and made wrong choices. But he's trying to make better choices now. Are you mad at him? I thought about that. I'm disappointed. But I also understand that people make mistakes. Big ones sometimes. What matters is whether they learn from them. My granddaughter, 10 years old and sharp as a tack, looked at me seriously. "Grandma, were you scared when those men chased you?" "Terrified." "But you kept going anyway?" "I did." "That's brave." I hugged her close. That's what we do for the people we love. We keep going, even when we're scared. On the last night of their visit, after the children were asleep, I sat alone on the porch, watching stars emerge over the lake. My hip ached. It always did when rain was coming. My hands were spotted with age. My hair was completely gray now. I'd stopped coloring it months ago. I looked exactly like what I was. A woman past 60, marked by time and experience. But I felt different than I had a year ago. Stronger, more certain. I'd learned things about myself I'd never known. That I could be brave when necessary, strategic when required, fierce when my family was threatened. I'd also learned the limits of trust, the complexity of morality, the ways even good people could make terrible choices. Ruby had lied to me. Philip had used me. But they'd also been victims in their own ways, of circumstance, of fear, of their own weaknesses. The house behind me was quiet, filled with the breathing of my sleeping grandchildren. The lake before me was still, reflecting starlight like scattered diamonds. This place that had been violated, used as a hiding spot for evidence and secrets, was mine again. Clean, honest, safe. My phone buzzed. A text from Ruby. "Thank you for everything, Mom. I love you more than words can say." I typed back, "I love you too. Sleep well." Then I added, "And no more secrets." Her response came immediately. "No more secrets? I promise." I believed her. Or maybe I chose to believe her. Sometimes faith was an act of will, a decision to trust again even after betrayal. Ruby would have to earn back what she'd lost. But I was willing to let her try. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and approaching rain. Inside, the fire had burned down to embers. I stood, joints protesting, and went inside to bank it properly before bed. As I locked the door and turned off the lights, I caught my reflection in the darkened window. An old woman. Yes. but one who'd survived something extraordinary, one who'd used wisdom instead of strength, patience instead of panic, intelligence instead of force. Harold used to say that age was just a number. I'd always thought he was being kind, trying to make me feel better about growing older. But now I understood what he'd really meant. Age wasn't weakness. It was accumulated knowledge, experience, the ability to see patterns, to think strategically, to understand that the longest route was sometimes the safest one. I'd spent my career as a librarian teaching people how to find information, how to verify sources, how to distinguish truth from fiction. Those skills had saved my family. Those skills, patient, unglamorous, invisible, had brought down a criminal empire. The young agents and lawyers had their strength, their technology, their badges and guns. But in the end, what had mattered was an old woman who knew how to read people, how to recognize lies, how to wait for the right moment to act. I climbed the stairs to bed, feeling every one of my 63 years but also feeling satisfied in a way I hadn't in a long time. The mystery was solved. The criminals were caught. My family was safe. The wall in my living room was repaired, stronger now than it had been before, its secrets exposed to light and air and no longer festering in darkness. Just like me. I slept that night without nightmares, without fear, wrapped in blankets, and the knowledge that I'd done everything right. Not perfectly. There'd been mistakes and close calls and moments of doubt, but I'd protected what mattered. I'd fought with the weapons I had. Intelligence, persistence, wisdom, and I'd won. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.